Left of the box. How about we get into an absolutely ridiculous story that I can't believe is actually a story, but it is a story because, the Premier of Ontario is such a douche canoe. Like, oh my God, I can't. Because he said something really offensive the other day, whereas people who are in encampments should get off their ASS and hand in an application and get a job. And I have a huge rant about that I posted, and I have a segment about that. This is just the ridiculous. Like, this is ridiculous. It's almost so ridiculous it's offensive, but it's not offensive in nature. It's just so ridiculous. Let's get to it. Doug Ford wants to solve traffic in Ontario by putting a tunnel under the 401. He wants to just shove a tunnel under a pre-existing highway. One that would be about 60 kilometers long, the largest in the world. Without any thought ahead of time as to things like what kind of land are you going through, the sustainability of that, the cost, and we'll get into some of these things, but even just some simple things that people don't tend to think about because, in cities, you're pretty much in concrete jungles anyway, and things like the subways in Toronto and stuff like that, they're made for that and they're in that area. But if you want to build a tunnel through 60 kilometers of land in Canada, you run into a problem with the thaw-freeze cycle. That can be a problem, especially in squishy land, like squishy farmland. That is a big problem. But the idea was to make a tunnel under the 401. He wants the biggest hole in the world, other than the hole that's in his brain. Oh my God. So, cost of Ford's Highway 401 tunnel dream would be astronomical, experts say.
After unveiling his 401 tunnel vision, Premier Doug Ford says he's been getting props.
Huh? After talking about his tunnel vision? Huh? Huh? I see what you did there.
I've been getting overwhelming responses on the phone.
The Ford government revealed plans to potentially build the world's largest tunnel under the 401, up to 60 kilometers long to relieve the traffic tension. The government is ordering up a feasibility study to determine the length, but the Premier appears determined to build.
We just have to do something. The traffic is absolutely horrendous on the 401.
But the project is now being met with sober second thoughts from experts in infrastructure.
The costs are going to be astronomical, and the impact and the benefits are likely not to materialize in terms of resolving congestion.
Experts are warning the project will be significant in scope. An east-west tunnel with transit down the middle would require years of construction and closures, multiple on and off ramps, ventilation systems, emergency access, and of course, billions of dollars. The Ontario line is currently being built for $700 million per kilometer.
So that's the subway in Toronto that has been a boondoggle for quite some time. And the costs have, of course, like when you do the initial cost assessment, it's one thing, but then as you start doing it, the cost seems to go up drastically and it's still not done.
Meaning a tunnel of the 401 size could easily cost $40 billion or more.
I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a transportation expert. I'll leave it for the expert to make a decision.
But the Premier insists he's overcome construction challenges before.
They kept saying the downtown relief line for 30 years. They talked about it. We finally are getting it done. They've talked a lot about a lot of things. We're finally getting things done here.
Still, the Premier is being cautioned to slow down.
Ultimately, the Premier should not be making a decision about a project of this scope without the feasibility study. It should be released to taxpayers so we can all see it.
To allow taxpayers to take stock of how Queen's Park is about to spend your money. Now, multiple sources tell Global News that this was a tightly held secret, so much so that the majority of members in the Ford government didn't know it was happening.
A secret, you say? A tightly held secret, so much so that most members in the caucus didn't know? I'm sorry, this is Doug Ford. He blurted this out at a press conference because it came to his mind and he thought it would sell good in the moment without thinking about anything first. And then afterwards said, oh no, it was just a secret that the rest of the caucus didn't know yet. We were talking about it. It was just, we were holding it back, as opposed to, no, I just said it. That's what happened.
Plan was never presented to the Progressive Conservative Caucus, nor was it given to cabinet members in advance. The first many of them heard about it was when the Premier made the announcement yesterday morning.
Because that's when it first popped into his brain.
Alongside the 401. Of course, there's a lot of questions about whether the government is preparing for an early election and whether this is part of that in 2025. We asked the Premier yesterday. He said he has yet to make up his mind about an early vote.
And just a little bit more from Global News, Doug Ford's tunnel highway plan will likely cost tens of billions of dollars and be hugely complicated, expert and advocates say. So part of the article says, a recent Toronto Region Board of Trade report found the Ontario Line and Yonge subway extension are set to cost around $700 million per kilometer, while the Eglinton Crosstown LRT will come in at $674 million. The Scarborough subway extension is projected to be $600 million per kilometer. So again, we're talking about like subway lines at hundreds of millions per kilometer. This isn't a subway line. Like a subway line is just one tunnel, really, or a tunnel that can fit two trains that go beside each other. He wants to build an underground fucking highway. It's going to be more than $40 billion at the end of the day. Because if it's just $700 million per kilometer and we're talking about a subway, come on. You don't have to be an expert to know it's going to cost a hell of a lot more than that. Goldberg, who also studied subway projects in New York City as a compactor, said the cost for Highway 401 underground could be even higher. We're talking about something like $2 to $3 billion per mile in New York. They're talking about 33 miles of Highway 401 tunnel. That's well over $50 billion, he said. Doug Ford didn't say, for example, how many lanes this tunnel would be, which would make a huge difference. Again, he didn't think, he just thought about this in the moment. But like logistically speaking, if we're talking about a simple two-lane highway under the highway, just adding what, 2 lanes, one going east, one going west, that's not going to get rid of congestion on the 401. It's not. So how many lanes on one of the widest highways in the world? How many more lanes do you want to shove underneath there? Because to spend billions just to open up a single extra lane makes no sense. You know, coming from the common sense conservatives, makes no sense. While the cost would be astronomical to build under Highway 401, one professor said it's technically possible. The fact it can be done, however, he said, is not a reason to push on. My working premise for these types of projects is anything is technically feasible within reason. Maddie, Director of Infrastructure Institute at the University of Toronto, told Global News, we have an international space station. We can build a 55 kilometer if we want to. The question is not whether we can, but whether we should. Sounds like Jurassic Park. And in this case, the costs are going to be astronomical, and the impacts on the benefits are likely not to materialize in terms of resolving congestion.
And Tracy, sources tell Global News that the idea to tunnel underneath the 401 comes directly from Premier Doug Ford. It's an idea that sources say he's been pushing behind the scenes for years in his government, but hasn't really gone anywhere. Now, with
This sounds like, Donald Trump and Space Force or Elon Musk and Hyperloop. So there's already a few construction projects that are just, again, boondoggles. The Highway 413, the Bradford bypass, like doubling the size of our subway. It's a no-no. Like, it's just, there's already so half-ass construction things going on under Doug Ford. Not to mention like the whole green belt scandal and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know. Somewhere basically it's saying that, I can't remember if it was in a tweet or an article, where a representative from the federal government was saying, yeah, he hasn't talked to us about it because you will need federal funding for this as well. It's not just provincial. Federal funding would also be involved. And they're like, he hasn't talked to us about this yet. Like, he's just kind of pitching this out there, but he hasn't talked to us about getting any sort of funding for this. And so this is the Toronto Region Board of Trade. A solution is going to take big, bold ideas. We have to dig or we're not going to solve this problem. A couple people said to explain why a highway and transit line beneath the 401 is the type of forward-thinking initiative governments should pursue. The feasibility study of the 401 tunnel is a crucial step. There's a difference between like big, bold ideas that like a high school student would have versus ones that experts would have that are like a little bit more grounded and realistic. The idea, again, just the idea of putting a highway under the 401. Like, there aren't crashes every day on the 401 that are bad enough. Do you want to be involved in a crash in a tunnel under the 401? And somebody just saying, like, to be clear, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. A 50-kilometer traffic tunnel under the 401 would cost 150 to 200 billion or 20% of GDP. You could buy the 407, and we'll talk a little bit more about the 407 in a moment, and the provincial municipal taxes on the next 1 million homes, add 150 kilometer of rail to the GO network. Oh, what's this? A rail line. That would be so helpful, and still have money left over. And just a TDOT resident mentioning this part of this, for anyone who didn't catch this part of Doug Ford's statement, that we would amortize the cost over a number of years. Simply, he means he would take on hundreds of billions of dollars in debt. Ford had already added debt faster than any government in Ontario's history.
It would be one of the largest public infrastructure projects in the world.
Yes.
So yeah, largest infrastructure project in the world for a tunnel, a highway under a highway.
Probably cost hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. Where would the money come for that?
Well, I don't think it's going to cost hundreds of billions, but in saying that, we're going to do a feasibility study, look at the cost, and see if we amortize it over a number of years.
Yeah, it would absolutely cost hundreds of billions. Doug Ford just whining, saying it took Bonnie, so Bonnie is the leader of the provincial Liberal Party. It took Bonnie minutes to confirm what I already knew. She opposes building a tunnel under the 401, and she'll cancel Highway 413. Bonnie will always say no. We're saying yes to building and yes to getting drivers out of traffic. And this person's kind of saying what I think. David is saying this tunnel will never get built. You know it. I know it. Anyone with half a brain cell knows it. Your crooked government is doing bread and cruises, circuses, while Ontarians starve in their homes, die in the streets, and suffer in hospital hallways. What is more important to the people in Ontario? A tunnel under the 401 that will cost hundreds of billions and take years, decades even, to build, to relieve traffic. And that's just a way that could happen. Or, have a family doctor. Like, all the provincial money that would go to that, instead of having a family doctor, having better social services, having a basic income. Like, all of that would bleed our social services dry. Absolutely dry. And Colin DeMello, he was the reporter from Global News, just a statement from Merritt Stiles, who is the leader of the provincial NDP. She said, has he thought about this for more than 5 minutes? I don't think he has. So let's pull up a map here. We're going to look at a map. Yay! So this here, this line here, let's zoom in. This is the 401. See that? That there. That's the 401 right there. And this here is a highway called the 407. You notice how it runs almost parallel to the 401 and covers all of that distance? Look, it's still going up. There's the 401, there's the 407. They're still kind of running parallel to each other. They're still kind of running parallel to each other. They're still kind of running parallel to each other. You get where I'm going with this? You see, the 407 is an interesting highway. It's very underused because it's one of the rare toll highways here in Canada. We don't have too many of them, and the 407 is one of them. It used to be provincially owned, and so then all the money from the 407 went to the province. It got sold. So when Mike Harris was elected premier in 1995, on his platform of the Common Sense Revolution, conservatives love saying common sense without actually knowing what that term means. The Ontario government faced an 11 billion annual deficit and 100 billion debt, seeking to balance the books, and a number of publicly owned services were privatized over the following years. Although initially spared, Highway 407 was privatized quickly in the leading up to the 1999 provincial elections. It was leased to a conglomerate of private companies for $3.1 billion. The Ontario-based corporation known as 407 International was initially owned, blah, blah, blah. Basically, the Conservatives sold it off. And also, the Conservatives, Doug Ford, has forgiven them for not, the private owners during COVID, for not paying up what they should be paying. Like, the province lost so much on this. And the thing is that, if we go back to the map, the 407 is a very underused highway here because nobody wants to pay the tolls. The tolls just goes into making corporations richer. It doesn't even go back into the province anymore. And the rare time that I've been on it, because if I'm driving up to Ottawa, yeah, you kind of want to go on the 407. Otherwise, you have to drive through Toronto on the 401, which is just a nightmare. But if you drive on the 407, it's a breeze. There's nobody on there because of the tolls. And so do you know what you could do to help alleviate traffic on the 401? Give a pass to all the truck drivers. All the truck drivers can go onto the 407. Get them off of the 401. Get all the truck drivers onto the 407. That would make sense if you gave a pass to all the truck drivers, because look at that ground they could cover. Now, if we start scrolling out further from here, again, as I was mentioning, about half of the population of Canada lives in this area right here that I'm circling, that you probably might not be able to see with the teeny tiny mouse. So from, let's say, Quebec City down to Windsor, which would be down here. This line here, this almost straight line here, has half the population of this country. How is there not a high-speed rail that goes through that? Like, that is just, again, half the population is right there. We need a high-speed rail there. That's what we need. Or just, use the 401 and maybe put a rail line up the middle of it instead of, a tunnel under it. Like, there's so many other reasonable solutions, like more expansion on the GO Transit and things of that sort. Or there were supposed to be all-day GO buses from my area to Toronto, which would also help. Like, there are so many other feasible solutions to this. And what does he do? Say he wants to build a tunnel. That will never happen because it's a ridiculous, stupid idea. But, why would Doug Ford be pushing this all of a sudden? Well, Doug Ford's 401 tunnel scandal would benefit the exact same developers as Doug Ford's Greenbelt scandal. In this, Ford schemed to replace billions that they lost when the Greenbelt deals were reversed. So, there were some issues around him selling off parts of the Greenbelt, and there were certain groups of people that would benefit from it. And TDOT resident does a really good job of digging into some information and found some crossover with potential contractors. So the potential cost of the tunnel project remains an open question. The government said it won't publish the cost of the feasibility study until a contract has been awarded to explore the possibility of the route. While the premier said that the study would dictate the cost of the overall project. So until this has been awarded to a corporation, they won't say how much this is going to cost. Funny how that works. That they would do it in that order, so they won't let Canadians know after this feasibility study, Ontarians know after this feasibility study, roughly how much they suspect this is going to cost until a contract has been awarded to explore the possibility of the route. This is what Doug Ford said back in 2018. You shouldn't have to choose between heating and eating. You shouldn't have to wait weeks to see a doctor. You shouldn't have to be away from your family because you're stuck in traffic. Wynn's government is out of touch with the real hardships our people face. People wait weeks to see a doctor. People are choosing between heating and eating. People are stuck in traffic due to lack of rail lines and things of that sort. What exactly has Doug Ford done to improve those since he's got in office? Oh, right. He's made them all a lot worse. A lot worse. No common sense in the common sense conservatives at all. Like just an absolutely ridiculous ploy of an idea. You know, not a rail line, not trains, not converting the 407 for the use of trucks only. Like, it's just, no. We're going to build the largest infrastructure project tunnel in the world under the 401 to help with traffic. Is less traffic on the 401 worth hundreds of billions of dollars? And I say this as someone who's regularly commuted to Toronto on that 401. It's one of the worst highways in North America. I don't want taxpayer money going towards a stupid tunnel under the 401. Like, it's already one of the widest highways in the world. Like, it's up to 18 lanes wide at times. Like, trying to navigate the 401, especially when you're in Toronto, is a nightmare. Like, you have to know where you are going. Like, you have to be familiar with the roads and stuff, or you're going to get so turned around and lost. Like, it is just... I used to live in Toronto, so I'm a little bit familiar with them. And I used to commute up to Toronto quite regularly for different things. So I'm familiar with the 401. And just the thought of, trying to fix that by putting another highway under it. So you just want a traffic jam in an enclosed tube. Like, seriously, people would be passing out from fumes because I seriously doubt he would ventilate it properly. And then just the claustrophobic feeling of like 60 kilometers of tunnel. Who would want to drive through that? And the accidents. And if you get stuck in there, like, oh my God, so much can go wrong with that.